Freddy, he was our youngest child. Very happy-go-lucky, wicked sense of humour, you know, even from a very young age.
He'd just finished his A-levels, so he was having a year out.
He'd had a great summer. Well, he had everything in front of him. His life was, you know, the big wide world there for the taking. On that day, we just finished doing a few jobs together, and he said, I'm just going to load up a few of those spare patio slabs that are in the yard, Dad, and I'm going to go over and help Celia and Ben. And I said, yep, no problem at all. That's okay. You know, I'll see you in a bit. And then I got a phone call.
And she just said, get down here quickly. There's been an accident. It's one of those situations where you kind of think, you know, this could be life-changing. So you drive very slowly because you don't really want to get there.
I went round the next corner and then the next corner. I thought, well, where on earth is he? You know, what's going on? And just as I approached that Beambridge junction, I looked in the air and I saw the air ambulance hovering above me. And excuse me.
It was a normal day on base. I think we'd been out to one other job that day, and then the red phone went and the call came in. We were in the overhead over the scene, and we could see this large lorry where you could see the concrete blocks on the back of it, and we could see a car attached to the front of the lorry that had clearly been hit at significant speed, and we weren't expecting very good outcomes for anyone in the vehicle, just judging from the scene. Freddy was very, very sick indeed. He was hardly breathing for himself. He wasn't responding. He was very, very pale. He'd lost all but a very, very weak carotid pulse, which means he wasn't getting enough blood circulation to perfuse his major organs. So he was really, really very sick. And at this point, we didn't really know exactly what his injuries were. We knew that he had internal bleeding, but he really was very, very close to death. I'm convinced if he'd spent much longer in that car, he would have died in the car.
I just saw him slumped over the steering wheel, and I put my hand on him and I shook him, and he was, you know, it appeared to me he was lifeless. Like he didn't respond, he didn't blink, he didn't. So I just naturally assumed he was dead. Do I need full name?
Go on then, go for it.
What full name?
Yes, please.
My name's Freddy Vellicott. The last thing I remember is probably leaving the farm gates on the way to the junction, but I don't reckon I can remember the last mile or so coming up towards that junction. There's a lot of things that could have gone a lot differently that day. It's best not to think about what could have happened and focus on what did happen.
So extrication is the process of removing injured people from vehicles following a motor vehicle collision. Historically, we extricated people through what's called a movement minimisation approach. So we took absolutely every care to avoid movement for these patients because we were worried about taking primary spinal cord injury and causing a secondary injury, so movement making those worse. And I unfortunately have got personal experiences of people who I've talked to who have passed away in their vehicle during the processes of extrication, which in the UK we know on average takes about 32 minutes. And that's a long, long time when you're bleeding to death. So we started to do some science to have a look at this in detail. We did 9 studies in total. And the main things we found were that spinal cord injury, of course, is incredibly important, but it was present in less than 1% of the patients that we were extricating. And the rest of the patients had time-critical injuries. And as a result, we found an excess mortality, so more people were likely to die. The other thing we found is that the movement minimisation techniques that we were using weren't actually minimising movement. And instead of being slow and steady, they were just slow. So we worked with a whole multidisciplinary team to look at the new evidence that we'd gathered and translate that into new guidance. And that new guidance, instead of having a movement minimisation focus, we've got a time focus.
When I was stood with the lorry driver, it must have been Tim that came up and said to him, "Can you move the lorry? I need you to move the lorry."
It was very clear that Freddy was critically unwell and that his injuries were what we call time dependent, which means if we don't do something about them very, very soon, they'll get worse, and that will lead to death. And as a result, we knew that we only had a very small window of time in which we could deliver meaningful intervention to try to save his life. And we knew that we couldn't do that whilst he was stuck in the car, tangled in the metal.
He thought I had about 30 seconds.
Tim was relaying to the fire crew, just get him out of the vehicle as quickly as you possibly can.
This was a whole team effort. My air ambulance colleagues had gone to prepare some things for anaesthesia so that when Freddy did come out, we could look after him very, very rapidly.
The fire brigade cut the driver's side door off. They extracted me out that side. Tim told me that I had about 70% of my circulating blood volume in blood transfusions.
If it hadn't have been for that rapid extraction method and the air ambulance and the fire crew and the fantastic crew at Southampton Hospital, you know.
So just over a week later, I phoned Freddy's mom, Jess, and was very surprised to hear that he was well, sitting up, generally being a grumpy teenager, but had a planned discharge in the next few days. And I was absolutely gobsmacked. It's very, very rare that we see patients who are quite so badly injured make such a rapid recovery.
Well, I don't have any lasting injuries. The only thing I do have is a few scratches which are almost barely visible on my arm, and that is about as far as it goes, and which is, again, unbelievable, really.
So this is your first day in ICU. Yeah, this is as I approach the bed.
I think it's remarkable that everything that day, that multiple elements meant Freddy survived. It could have been a very different story.
It's fantastic with the case of Freddy to see the work that the team did, both in terms of the research on the exit project, but also the teams coming together on the day, seeing how that interaction between research and the operational environment and teamwork coming together can make a real difference to someone's life. And yeah, I'm really proud of the work that we've done.
Oh, I'd just like to thank him endlessly, really. Obviously Tim, and obviously everyone else involved that day. Yeah, they've done an amazing thing, and I'd just like to say thank you. I'm extremely grateful.